Hi there, Vibe Gardeners. Welcome to another episode of Vibe Gardening Inform Edition, where we're going to go over the lessons learned from my growing hydroponic spinach this winter of or spring of 2026. With that said, let's go. All right, so this time we're actually going to be combining my month four, I believe, or was it, I think, four of the hydroponic spinach updates with my lessons learned because we'd already have kind of drawn this out one more month than I probably would have normally done it because I want to actually play around a little bit more with comparing nutrition with hydroponic spinach. And also at this point now, I'm at the start of doing my tap water versus RO water, filter tap water experiment. So it's a natural time for me to talk about what I've learned from growing hydroponic spinach, traditionally using RO water here, the way I've started. So I'm going to go over a little bit of everything from nutrition to plant health, the growth style, and the different aspects of equipment and being able to maintain these plants. So with that said, let's go. All right, so to start off, we're going to talk a little bit about nutrition because it's actually one of the final lessons learned I discovered from the final month here of this experiment, or really, it's not really experiment, but me learning, my learning journey of growing spinach hydroponically. And one of the things I've noticed is that if you remember, this original bed here was using RO water using the Flora series, where I fine-tuned my nutrition to what I believe is what lettuce need, spinach needs. And then with this yellow tab here, what I've done was I was using just MaxiGrow from General Hydroponics and using that one part powder to see how things grow. So one of the things I've noticed is that regarding nutrition, now everything to this point, I believe what I've done was correct. I started the spinach. I would take one of um, these seed starting tray for starting seeds in soil, and I would fill that with either now I'm using actually filtered tap water that takes out the chloramine and chlorine. And before I was using RO water with some calcium, magnesium, or CalMag supplement. And I would keep this at minimum ppm or nutritional density. And I would actually start out the spinach in this water here to give it enough time to stabilize. And what I would end up doing is I would let it spend about a whole week in that solution to firmly solidify. And if you watch my setup, you will notice that I spent half hour explaining a 2 day uh, filming operation of the way I germinate these things. So once they're done germinating in about 3 days, they would have a cotyledon that is worth putting to these basically sliced up um, growth sponge that I put in there. And I would take those seedlings and I would put them in that no nutrition water for about a whole week. And once it established itself, I would move it on to one of these containers, which has about anyone that has about up to 600 ppm of nutrition. That's 600 ppm after the 100 ppm of calcium, magnesium, or CalMag supplement. And that worked out really well. And one of the things that I learned in the final month is that um, I probably didn't give it enough calcium magnesium supplement to really be that healthy. But I only give it about 100 ppm's worth of it. I probably should have it be more close to 200 ppm. So I've been kind of trying that out, and it's working pretty well. And the other thing I've noticed is that it seems like the leaf on the spinach here with the MaxiGrow, Hydroponic MaxiGrow, actually grew larger, way bigger leaves than my special formulation of the Flora series. So what that tells me is that MaxiGrow is actually more elite than my blend of the Flora series, which I used 2 part Flora Bloom and 10 part everything else to mix it in there. And the main problem, the drawback I saw was MaxiGrow. It would actually get the pH to drop throughout the whole process. And actually, this container here, throughout time, after only about 2 fills of the MaxiGrow, the pH will drop into the low fives, which is a little too low for the plants. So when I do the close-up, you will see that the leaf texture is a little rough. And that is due to the pH dropping below ideal for these plants. And after I used some pH up, I was able to get it to the right level. And I believe MaxiGrow is actually optimized for usage with tap water. And so I'll keep that in mind, but I'll also keep an eye closer on the pH to make sure that it's not getting too low from using the MaxiGrow. So let's talk a little bit about the growth stages of it. So like I said earlier with the nutrition, the growth stage really does best starting the plant out with my original video about how to basically germinate these things. I found it to actually be the most effective still of taking the growth sponges and cutting it in half and hollowing out the center. Because I tried also using rock wool within net pots. And I've noticed that, yes, the success is not bad, which I'll show you with a close-up. It's a lot of effort to get it in there and stabilize it. And the effect isn't exactly even as successful because I did have a little bit more failure with the rock wool technique than I did with the cutting up of the growth sponge. And the reason why I did that was that I do want to have a higher chance of success by doing the paper towel germination with 10% hydrogen peroxide. And that is ideal to get the most, predictable system and waste less material for continuously growing it because obviously we consume quite a bit of spinach. So efficiency is key for us. And another big thing I kind of noticed too is really succession growing in that I would grow part of it. And as you can see right here, I actually didn't plant these pots here until a good couple weeks after I started those guys. And those guys are actually behind these guys over here. So that way I would be able to essentially guarantee some kind of harvest throughout the whole entire process. And that's kind of key for me. So this is kind of one of the things that really help things. And I'll be very honest, I kind of lost track of how long it takes for the spinach to get to the point of maturity of being able to harvest. Because there is a package date for days to maturity, but because we harvest both young and old leaves in that, it's just for a smoothie. Taste doesn't quite matter, and even after they bolt and flower, it doesn't really matter all that much that we have to harvest the leaf before the bolting. So it really comes down to just succession planting and make sure that there is just consistently leaf coming out. And it doesn't matter quite so much how fast they grow, as long as you're basically planting more every couple of weeks to make sure that you get yourself plenty of leaf coming up. All right, so before I give you guys a close-up of the system here, one of the things that I kind of want to talk a little bit about too is what I forgot to mention in nutrition, in that even though the EC for spinach has really been marked at 1.8 EC all the way up to about 2.3, or anywhere from 900 ppm all the way up to about 1150 or so ppm, what I've really discovered is that getting that high doesn't make actually that much of a difference in the growth of the vegetation, in that it really between the 600 zone over here, ppm, which is about 1.2 EC, and basically here I kept it about a little bit more than 1.8 EC or 900 ppm, between 900 and 1000 ppm. I've noticed that the growth speed really hasn't been that different, which what tells me is that even though it's marketed as being at 1.8 EC, I realized that it really doesn't use it up that fast, and it's really limited, honestly, by the pH. And that actually comes in a bigger factor than actual EC. within the nutrition fluid. And I think a lot of it has to possibly do with the temperature in the basement. And I'm not 100% sure on that. It's one of those things that I have to basically do some research on. But I feel like the temperature is making the limiting factor more on the pH than the actual EC. So honestly, at this point, I don't think it would matter if I just let the EC of this drop below 900 and drift into the 600s, 700s, 800s, anywhere around there. I think it would actually be just fine. And yeah, so that's actually basically the main thing I learned about the whole growing process is in the past month as well, is that the nutrition really doesn't quite matter um, between 6 and 900 ppm or 1.2 to 1.8 EC. All right, so let's take a look at the original system that started with the RO water and using the Flora series. As you can see, the leaf texture has been pretty consistent. It's pretty smooth and curved on the edges. It is essentially jungle right now. And that is every single hole right now is producing spinach. And what I've actually done differently compared to the first harvest was I let these older plant structures just live. Because what I've noticed was it's still producing leaves at a rate that's acceptable for harvest. And I let it be. And as you can see with some of the newer plants, it's actually getting to be about the same age as the older ones with the way it looks. And it is producing about 2 harvests every week or every 4 days. I'm able to harvest about 4 ounces of spinach from this. Actually, both systems combined. And if we look at the below lid structure, the roots are pretty healthy. Even with the older one, like this one, the color difference between the older one and the newer one really isn't that much. And the really, I mean, right now you're seeing a little bit of the tinting of the color, and that's actually due to the color added to the Flora series nutrition. Nothing to do with the roots, because if the nutrition was without color, the roots would be pristine white. So everything is quite healthy as it is. All right, so now with the second system that's using the MaxiGrow nutrition with also RO water, we see here that the texture is significantly different. As you can see here, we got some that's got seriously, I guess, rough textures in comparison. And this one has not been growing that much. And these honestly are still recovering from super low pH for spinaches due to the chemistry altering effect of the MaxiGrow, lowering the pH of the solution into the low 5s. And considering that, and also the basically the more full nutrition, it seems like it's actually making the texture exhibit the behavior a little more. As you can see right here, I've been using these what you call it, these net pot with the rock wool on it, and the result is actually about as good as ones that are using the described technique of cutting out the grow sponge and giving way for the root of the spinach to really burrow through. So both worked fairly well. Now I did have more failure with rock wools, and it was actually more work and not as comfortable working with compared to the grow sponge. So I don't think it's really worth the trouble anymore. And now that now we've seen the plant and look under the lid, we see, well, actually it's kind of hard to see the color here, but the color of the root is tinted by whatever the yellowish green color that comes with the MaxiGrow. It is also quite pristine and clean, and if the nutrition was clear, it will be pristine white roots. So everything is growing healthy as expected with this as well. All right, the final thing that's really worth mentioning is if you look at the growth sponge, under the stem, you see a lot of algae. As a matter of fact, it is bubbling up, the algae. And generally speaking, for younger spinaches, this will be a real problem as it competes with oxygen. But usually this doesn't develop fast enough for it to be a real issue. So that is the main reason why I have gotten away from using those covers on top, those stickers that covers it, because I didn't feel like it was worth the trouble, an extra expensive material to do it. But like I said, I've got to the point of basically fast production, and efficiency is key here. And it was just not worth the trouble to cover the growth sponge because it's not really hurting the plant at all. Now, a final little preview of what's coming. This is my spinach growing hydroponically in tap water that has chloramine filtered using the active carbon black filter that I installed on my faucet in the basement. And this is going to be my next series of hydroponics experiment. And these are planted at the same time as these other spinaches here. And right now, they've had nutrition at the same level, at the same time, to give it a consistent environment. Now, given that there could be genetic variation, I'm going to not really test the timing of it. What I would do is I would test actually to see if the plants will be equally as healthy at their peak and produce as much yield. And that will be the real test coming up with the tap water, with the filtered chloramine versus the traditional RO technique. Both will be using the MaxiGrow nutrition, which I think for the tap water, it would actually be a lot less maintenance because of the pH dropping behavior of MaxiGrow. All right, guys, so that concludes my lessons learned I had on growing spinach hydroponically in the spring of 2026 and the winter of 2025. And I hope that gave you guys a good idea of how to get your own hydroponic spinach operation going and how to be able to also get a consistent, efficient growing mechanism going. Now, over the next couple of years, I will still continue to try to make the spinach production more and more efficient and more consistent. And then when I find anything earth-shattering or crazy, I'll definitely put up a video about it. Now, in the meantime, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift now my attention to comparing and trying to get filtered tap water of filtered chloramine to work for growing hydroponically, and spinach is my natural first experiment. So with that said, guys, keep gardening and keep vibing. Let's go.